Here we're gonna go. All right. Well, we are live. It's June 17th. We are in the midst of early summer. It's already a beautiful time of the year in Austin, Texas, and in Texas and nationwide. And we're in the middle of hurricane season, all kinds of fun things going on around us. And we are missing our John Butler today. He is running late. He's triple committed himself. So at some point, I think he's going to show up. But we have a great guest today, and we have our own Llewellyn King, who is setting himself up. I think, Llewellyn, you're on mute right now. And as always, we cover digital transformations and talk about the smart grid and smart utilities, smart cities, smart buildings, and Digital 360 Summit is coming up, and we are in the midst of assembling the speaker body, and hopefully we'll have Terry and many others joining us along with Llewellyn. And lots of going on, lots of grant money being put out there to work, and the EVs are continually to happen, and the data center thing is growing like crazy. Crypto, it's all over the news about what's going to happen with Bitcoin and all kinds of transformations. And obviously manufacturing in Texas is going rampant, coming back. I don't know what the population is hitting Texas on a daily basis, probably 2,000 people, maybe more. And nobody brings their water or their power with them, unfortunately. So we got a lot of things to do to make everybody happy. So that said, Llewellyn King, what's going on in your neck of the woods?
Well, I'm looking at the electric situation across the board, and it's really not too optimistic. I've been looking back at what Warren Buffett, and with his very large holdings in electricity and gas pipelines, he said, I think it was in February, in his report to his stockholders, that the electric, basically he said the electric compact is broken, and that we can look forward to changes in ownership, which included the privatizing of certain, making public certain investor-owned utilities where they've been driven into bankruptcy. Two examples are Hawaii and Pacific Gas and Electric because of wildfires. We're going to see more of those. I'm doing a program for the U.S. Energy Association, one of the virtual press briefings I do every month, looking at the supply situation for the rest of the year and going forward, and it's not too optimistic. We could aim to see problems of supply in Texas, problems in California, possibly in the Carolinas. It's going to be very tight as the summer rolls on. But there are other factors, one of which is people are using more electricity because of the heat domes and the polar vortexes. And the result is that utilities are going to be faced with a lot of unpaid bills because people need the electricity and they've got this huge spike in their costs. And that's going to be a problem for utilities that is yet emerging. I think we're going to see a great slowdown in any conversion from fossil to renewable till we get through the shortage, if we get through the shortage, and we see nationwide a continual growth in demand, not always as high as it is in Texas, but in the Southwest, it's growing steadily. But across the country, it's growing with electric vehicles, electrification of things like steel plants, and of course, the huge demand that data centers are putting on the electric supply. In the out years, there may be, we may not need as much for data centers as we appear to need now if we get a new kind of photon chip that uses light rather than electricity. they will not need the water or the electricity that we presently need. But that's far out technology. Meanwhile, it's grow, baby, grow as fast as you can to deal with the realities of today, and then find out how people are going to pay for it. You cannot ask people sitting in 100+ degree temperature, which is what it reached in Washington, phenomenally got up to 104 yesterday. In all the years I lived in Washington, more than 50, we never got a temperature quite that high. So people have the air conditioning running flat out, consuming electricity, and they have to pay for it one day, which is going to be a challenge in a lot of parts and a lot of systems in the vulnerable areas of cities, even rural areas. So challenges ahead. We've got political instability. We don't know how, if we get a new administration, if it is a Trump administration, which looks highly likely, how it's going to deal with some of these problems. It has basically declared, that Trump has said so, and the Project 25, the sort of organizing document of conservative thinking at the moment, simply doesn't want to believe there is an energy problem, or that there are heat domes and polar vortexes, but there are. Utilities know that very well. It's a very stretched system, and it's not going to be, and I'm really keen to hear our guests talk about this, but it's not even going to be time to do routine maintenance. You can't do maintenance when you're running flat out, and sometimes the machinery is simply too hot to work on. So challenging. That is about the least I can say of what I'm finding out.
Sure. Well, it is good that we have the guest today that we have, Terry Naulty, because he's
solved all these problems.
He's an old friend and can give us an insight into what's going on. Terry happens to lead Denton Municipal Electric, which is owned by the city of Denton, and which just north of Dallas, and they have been fabulously growing and absorbing and becoming this community of the future with renewable energy 100% sourced, and all kinds of things going on with the grid and capabilities. And so welcome, Terry. How are you? You're muted. There you go.
Yeah, I'm doing great. Good to see you guys. Glad to be a guest today and talk about issues that are right on top of mind for me, trying to run a utility in this environment. It's certainly has its challenges, I think, as well said, as we are certainly, our cup runneth over with challenges, and we've got plenty of them in Texas.
Start with telling us, reminding us, we got a bunch of folks listening, and to tell us about Denton Municipal Electric a little bit, and tell us about you, and we'll go from there.
Sure. Well, Denton Municipal Electric, owned by the city of Denton, formed in 1905. It's one of two utilities in Texas that are 100% renewable supplied. We achieved that goal in 2021 after a plan was put before the city council in 2017. So we have a very diverse set of renewable resources that we draw power from. And then, of course, we recognize the risks associated with 100% reliance on what's an intermittent resource. And we have some quick starting backup generation in order to back up that renewable energy. And then we achieve 100% by effectively doing the accounting such that all the megawatt hours that we consume for the year are backed by energy that was generated from a renewable resource.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, that's a little bit about Denton Municipal Electric, very fast growing community. I think last year we had about a 7% increase in customer count.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, we've added some very large cryptocurrency and now data center loads coming into this area in proximity to the DFW Metroplex. We're one of the last areas that's reasonably close that's been relatively undeveloped. So we're just seeing a huge influx of people, lots of load growth, both organically and through economic development activities on the commercial and small industrial side, and then these behemoth data centers and cryptocurrency mining operations that are coming into Texas.
How many meters total count and how many megawatts now?
About 69,000 meters. Kind of native demand, peak demand is right around a little over about 410, 412 megawatts last summer. And then you add on the cryptocurrency and the data centers, and that adds about another 300, 350 megawatts on top of that. So what's interesting is those loads, you think about the load factor associated with a municipal utility, and a pretty good a population of residential, commercial, and industrial. Load factors in the upper 40%, and now you have these crypto and data mining that have come in, and they're about a 98% load factor. So, over the last 3 years, we've gone from maybe 2 million megawatt hours served to now about 7 million megawatt hours served. So it's a big increase.
You're printing money.
Well, let's hope. For the citizens of Denton, but I have to tell you, I mean, the cost of everything is going up.
Oh yeah.
And I think we've all seen, transformer costs are 200 to 300% higher than they were 3 years ago. Overall, the wholesale energy prices in the market are up significantly from where they were 2-3 years ago.
Mhm.
And I guess one thing I would just kind of, we all think about what's happening today in the market, and then try to draw conclusions about what's going to happen in the future. 3 months ago, August, futures contracts were trading for $180 a megawatt hour. And this morning they traded for $80 a megawatt hour. So that's what you call price volatility.
Sure.
And, with a short memory, we'd hate to see people get a little bit complacent about summer wholesale prices in the ERCOT market based upon what we're seeing this year, because certainly has not been like it has been the last few years
Sure.
with really high prices.
Yeah. Good. Llewellyn, you want to jump in?
Sure thing. Nice to see you, Terry. And Terry, I was wondering how you achieve your renewable portfolio. I looked on your website and I didn't get a picture from it. Are you a self-generator? Are you buying in? Is it a mix of both? The backup turbines, are those yours, or do they belong to, are they by contract?
Yeah, so we have a number of long-term 15 to 20-year power purchase agreements with various renewable resources, intermittent resources, wind and solar. And then we do own our own quick starting reciprocating engine facility. And then we have a number of just bilateral transactions in place with other market participants that usually include renewable energy credits or are based on some portfolio of renewable resources.
When you buy in like that and claim, and quite correctly, that you're 100% renewable, doesn't that, though, in the larger scheme of things, simply take that renewable power away from someone else who might otherwise have purchased it? It is not a total addition to ERCOT, is it?
Well, we try to make sure, and I think every single power purchase agreement that we've entered into with a intermittent renewable resource has been a greenfield new build project. So we're very cognizant of the fact that we don't want to just move pieces around on the playing field, right? We're actually incentivizing people to build more.
That's very interesting. I'm glad you said that. That's because there's been an issue with some of the big techs who want to be seen as green, buying up a lot of renewable and leaving the rest of the system to buy up non-renewable. It's just a perversion. But that's very interesting and interesting. What are your quick start? Are they gas turbines?
They are Wärtsilä units.
Diesel.
No, they run on
Interesting.
natural gas.
Oh, they do?
Yes.
Oh, good. Yeah.
And
But
they're
they're
also equipped.
reciprocating Wärtsilä.
Yeah, they're reciprocating engines. And when these units were designed and built 4 or 5 years ago, we're very, very careful and designed them with the cleanest possible post-combustion technology so that the emission profile from these units is the lowest of any similar unit in the United States, and I think in the world. And so the reason I say that is because, we're trying to be as environmentally responsible as possible as a community. And so, recognizing that there's intermittency associated with renewables, but people want their lights to be on and their air conditioner to be running at night when there's no solar and in the middle of the day when there's no wind and perhaps clouds. When we do kick those units on, we're being as responsible as we can by having the lowest possible emission profile that we can.
Very interesting. What kind of storage do you have?
We have not been able to pencil out the economics of utility scale of battery storage. We kind of use the market as our battery, if you will. And so since we're overproducing renewable energy during many hours, even though the price may be negative, right? We're effectively using the system as a battery, if you would.
Right.
I think one of the other things is when you look at the battery economics, much of the economics today are driven by the ancillary service revenues that you get by providing non-spin or reg up, reg down, ECRS. And as more and more batteries come onto the system, and we do see a proliferation of more batteries, the large ones, they're going to cannibalize that market. And the market only needs so much of each of those ancillaries. So if there are more and more offers into that market, and the bid is always for a known volume in each hour, I think the price of those ancillaries are going to go down, and the battery storage units are going to be relying more on pure energy arbitrage than the ancillary service market. So again, if you do, we're in the business of serving customers and for perpetuity, and so I can't count on those ancillary service revenues to show up year after year, and so it doesn't compete well with alternative technologies that we're looking at to provide energy during those intermittency periods.
Yeah. Terry, we were talking earlier, and the fact that ERCOT has been trying to deal with the growth of Texas, which is a fabulous challenge, and obviously it's better to be growing than not as a business. And you just mentioned how fast you guys grew, and it strikes me that here in Central Texas, communities like Kyle and Buda and San Marcos, in between Austin and San Antonio, are growing at a clip of even 25, 20, 15%. I mean, it's just gigantic growth. And so ERCOT has shared in late April, Pablo Vega's their CEO, that they're anticipating to add some 40 gigawatts of load to the grid in Texas. And I was just curious, and your thoughts about what is your expectations for Denton in the next 5 years. I mean, you seem to be incredibly favored for your location and what's happening in the Metroplex, which is growing like crazy. And as you mentioned, you still have reasonably priced land, and it's really beautiful there. Are you gonna keep the 7% growth steady, or are you gonna grow faster? What's going on in Denton?
Well, I think it's the law of averages when you think about it, right? The bigger you get, the the percentages are smaller and smaller because,
Mhm.
you know, a 7% growth on 60,000 customers. And then when you're at 70,000, it may be 5% growth. And then when you're at 75, but, you know, I think over the next 10 years, the population here is expected to go up by 50 to 60%. So that's a lot of growth. You know, a
Yeah.
city of population about 150,000 now, by the end of the decade is predicted to be over 250,000.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
we'll continue to see the residential and commercial growth, and that I think is easier to keep up with from a power supply perspective
Sure.
and from a distribution system planning perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's the large loads that come in that really kind of
Yeah.
change the paradigm a little bit.
Absolutely. So I'm curious about something. What you mentioned right now that energy storage utility scale is the math is still not there to deploy it and invest in it. And hopefully the prices of the technology will continue to come down and someday it will. What's your take on what's happening in Denton with electric vehicles and the notion of somehow trying to leverage the electric vehicles to be part of the solution? Is that something that is looming? What's your take on what is the horizon of
I
that?
think we're a few years away from that becoming a practical reality. I think the adoption rate here is actually higher than it is in Texas as a state.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think probably Austin has a little bit better adoption rate than what Denton has, but I think both Austin and Denton are fairly progressive communities where we see a lot
Mm-hmm.
of early adopters in this technology. So we are seeing more. We are seeing some private installations of quick charging, especially along the I-35 corridor,
Mm-hmm.
where people need to recharge their batteries quickly. Um, we are exploring actually, you know, you're always talking about, you know, being innovative and things. You know, one of the things that I'm looking at right now is we also have a very large, we have about 7 megawatts of rooftop solar in Denton.
Wow.
And we you know we incentivize that for many years by
Mm-hmm.
providing a large rebate to customers and a very nice price that we buy the energy back from that surplus. So one
Mm-hmm.
of the things I'm toying with right now is to actually go in and have utility owned batteries put into those homes that we can then time shift the surplus energy to the
Mm-hmm.
super peak at, you know, 7, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night.
Mm-hmm.
That's when we see the price volatility, and we could actually benefit
Mm-hmm.
from that overproduction of those rooftop solar units. So we're trying to
I
work out the economics on that and see what the adoption rate might be.
I like it. I whoa, bravo. I love it. That would be awesome. Because one of the things that is happening is this whole notion, and we have talked about it, obviously being in the industry forever, the virtual power plant and how the edge could actually solve and be part of the problem, I mean, solution of the growth and how you manage the growth. And we have a, I'm remiss to say that there's this utility retail energy provider in the competitive side, like the Encore around you, Octopus Energy, and they are actually doing some very wild things. And Octopus Energy is owned and by Octopus Energy USA, which is headquartered in Houston, is owned by UK company, and the UK is very progressive around this virtual power plant thing. And what I wanted to say was that the notion of Octopus Energy today, if you're a customer and if you have energy storage and EV and solar panels, you almost get up to 90% discount on your energy use whenever you use it, and they could, buy it back from you and control it and try
Mhm.
to, aggregate it. And you're well aware of the pilot that Encore is doing with Tesla and others about, how do batteries aggregated together impact the grid. And so I love the fact that you're exploring owning those assets, because in my opinion, when I was at Austin Energy back in 2003 to 2010, that was the panacea. The panacea was to partner with the infrastructure of the customer and really become that operator. And so, wow, that would be fabulous. I think
Yeah, I
that.
think the challenge for us is that, as a 100% renewable community, right? The value of solar to us is very small because we're already 100% renewable. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's really the value of energy, not the value of solar. And so the
Right.
value of energy is really important to us after the sun goes down, when we see the neck of the duck curve, and we need to have that ramp, and we see that peak demand. So we're trying to figure out a way to incentivize the continued growth of solar panels on rooftops in a
Mm-hmm.
community that's already 100% renewable,
Right. Right.
which is a little bit of a different paradigm, because
Yeah.
when you look at all the papers on value of solar, and you look at all the research, it's always in a community that's trying to get to 100% renewable. Well, we're already
Yeah.
there. So it's a
Yeah.
little bit of a different analysis. We just recently, in fact, we're in the midst of going to our city council to kind of revise that program a little bit, to really uh, uh, value the solar that people are pushing back to us for its true worth to us as a 100% renewable community. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that we're doing there is we're not trying to take money out of the program. We're actually trying to shift the money
Mm-hmm.
from the solar payback, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
into energy efficiency programs that, from a carbon perspective, as we look as a community to become more and more sustainable, we've just, it's like a 10-to-1 payback you get for every dollar invested in energy efficiency, whether insulation, new windows, new appliances, things like that, versus taking that same dollar and investing it in a solar panel. So,
Sure.
we just, we're trying to move to the next level of innovation here, to try to bring the whole community into more of a sustainable paradigm than just being 100% renewable on the power supply side.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. Llewellyn?
Terry, what are your challenges? What keeps you awake at night?
Power supply keeps me awake at night. I mean, just the load growth, and how to meet that load growth in the most cost effective manner. So, I mean, look, you can go out and add many, many more megawatts of contracted renewable energy, but it doesn't remove your exposure to price volatility during the intermittency periods. And
Mm-hmm.
so covering that price volatility in a way that keeps you competitive with surrounding energy markets is the challenge that we face. And we're really spending a lot of time on plans to, what's the next step in our Denton Renewable Resource Plan? How do we continue to meet these huge load growth uh, demands that we have, and still maintain that real high renewable supply portion, but more importantly, to protect ratepayers from the rate shock that you might see from being exposed to the wholesale market during those periods when your intermittent renewable resources aren't running and you're relying on the market.
Do you have some, I know you have an energy only market in Texas, but do you have some sort of day ahead pricing regime that has been brought in since Uri exposed the vulnerability of the market system?
Not really. The only thing that really prices in the day ahead market is ancillary services. So, when you buy a futures contract for an ERCOT settlement, it's a real-time settlement, not a day ahead settlement.
Okay, that's interesting. Uh, to meet this growth, are you are you looking to at some point installing generation of your own, or are you going to remain a purchaser of power? And
Well, that's a kind of policy decision that we leave up to the city council. We'll give them a number of options, including you know self-building additional generation, joint ventures with private entities that are building. You know, we've got a lot of potential builds that are going to happen in the ERCOT market because of the Texas Energy Fund that was approved by voters, earlier this year. And so we've got $5 billion that is going to be invested in dispatchable generation with low interest loans from the state. There's talk of another 5 billion being released in the next General Assembly session, and we're expecting, 10,000 megawatts of new generation to come into the market here in the next 3 to 5 years.
I've seen of your territory, and certainly by driving in that area, so it's not a very deep understanding that I have. It's fairly prosperous. So cutoffs presumably are not a huge challenge to you.
Well, I guess I would characterize Denton as primarily a blue collar town. I mean, it is our I don't know the exact numbers, but I think the per capita income here is below the state average in the city. So we have a very diverse customer base, but we've always been kind of a suburb of Dallas Fort Worth. And 10 years ago, if you couldn't afford real estate in Dallas or Fort Worth, you moved to Denton. And so we still have a lot of those residents here in Denton. But I will say that property values are rising, and it's being tougher and tougher. I can tell you from our employees' perspective, I have a lot of employees now that live in the country, 30, 40 miles away because, they can't afford housing prices here in Denton. But, it is what it is.
Unfortunately, that's something we see everywhere. I saw
Yeah.
people in Colorado driving 100 miles to work, and they're driving to work in Washington 80 miles from Front Royal and places like that. It's a phenomenon of our times. How do you deal with, particularly after periods of intense heat, when there's been a lot of electric consumption, how do you deal with unpaid bills?
Well, I think like most municipal utilities, we work for the customer. They own us. Our customers are our owners, and so we try to work with them to put payment plans in place to do that. And I'm proud to say that we have one of the lowest levels of uncollectibles in the industry, in the municipal industry. So we do a pretty good job of that. We work with the customers, and the great thing I think that's helped us a lot is that for many, many years, for the last 7 years, we've been the lowest cost provider of municipals in Texas, even though we're 100% renewable. So we've been the lowest cost or second to the lowest cost provider, and that's certainly helped people to be able to afford.
Is your peak fairly conventional from 5 to 9 at night, something like that?
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
Terry, real quick, a lot of things have changed in the rules of the game at ERCOT over the last 3 or 4 years. Can you comment on some of the major new things that you like? Any major changes? I understand, for example, that the $9,000 peak it's no longer the case. There are different metrics. There are different thresholds. Can you elaborate a little bit about how ERCOT has learned over the last 5 years and how things are, better now, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think, Uri in February of 2021 certainly exposed a lot of warts, right? I mean, it shone a light on the risk of the energy only marketplace. And so I think, ERCOT has through direction from the PUC and the legislature has made a number of changes. I think the most important of those has been the weatherization rules that impact both generation, but also gas supply infrastructure. And I think a lot of what gets missed in discussion about reliability and about how to ensure that what happened in February 2021 doesn't happen again is the gas infrastructure, because
Right.
there were many, many plants that were capable of running, but they couldn't get any gas delivered to them because of freeze ups on the on the gas pipeline system, whether it was
Mhm.
processing, compressor units, or wellhead freeze off. So I think there's still more work to be done on that, but it's unfortunate. My experience and my view tells me that until we experience another weather episode like that, we won't know how affected it was,
Sure.
right? So I think one of the things that we've been talking to folks in Austin about as an industry, the municipal industry, is the fact that most Texans today,
Mhm.
their heat comes from electric, not from natural gas,
Mhm.
especially in these areas with rapid growth, right? Um,
Yeah.
the natural gas infrastructure just isn't there to supply those homes with natural gas. And we've been conscious about the environmental footprint of natural gas versus electricity. And so most developers, when they're putting a subdivision in or an apartment complex, it's 100% electric.
Mhm.
Yet our curtailment rules on the gas side, right? They don't reflect that. They don't
Interesting.
reflect the fact that when gas used for space heating is a priority over all other uses, including electric generation.
Mhm.
And so that's something I think we need to work on still as the next legislative session comes up, and as we talk to folks at the Railroad Commission
Yeah.
about what's important. So I think the weatherization certainly is a big thing that came out of it. We've had a lot of other changes in the market. We have ORDIC price adders now in order to get a little more money into the market. We've had a lot of running units out of merit for conservative operations. There's a set of rules that were mandated by the legislature on the dispatchable reliability service (DRRS) that are being
Mhm.
worked on by the PUCT and by ERCOT now that are focused on trying to reduce these out of merit rucking orders. I think that will give us a clearer picture of what the true cost of the next megawatt of generation will be in the
Mhm.
market as we go forward. And of course,
Yeah.
as you mentioned, that the cap's been dropped from 9,000 to 5,000.
Mhm.
We've got the ECRS as a new ancillary service now. And so
Mhm.
there just been a lot of changes, and there's a lot more coming. Um, the PUCT now a year and a half ago passed a measure called the um, oh, drawing a blank on it now, but it's a reliability service. It's a
Mhm.
um, you know performance credit mechanism
Mhm.
PCM, which certainly has the potential to really change the way uh, generators look at the market and loads as well, because under that rule comes into existence, loads will have to procure enough dispatchable generation to meet their peak demand.
Yeah.
And, that's not currently the way it is in ERCOT. So we'll see what happens with that. Certainly a lot of discussion going on in Austin
Yeah.
and amongst the utilities, generation, the REPs, and all the MOUs and co-ops.
Yeah. I have several questions that I want to rattle real quick. I'm trying to simplify them, but questions related to is the reliance on renewable energy PPAs, on remote uh, renewable sources, relying on transmission getting to you, is that over time a risk? Or how do you see that? If your load is too much and you have this transmission additional costs. What's your take on the math on that long term?
Well, I think the more renewables that we add in Central and West Texas, the more congestion we see between
Mhm.
the delivery points into the grid. But
Mhm.
you know, there's ways to manage that, right? Through CRR. You can buy, you know, 3-year forward CRR positions to try to manage that risk. It requires a lot of analysis and modeling to be able to properly manage that. But we feel like that's a decent way to do it, and certainly done the same way in other RTO markets as well. So I think it can be managed. I think to your earlier point, if we're going to add 40 gigs of demand, we're going to have to add 40 gigs of generation, right? And we're going to have to add 40 gigs or plus of transmission. And so as we build out the transmission, we should see that congestion cost go down.
Right.
Now, our all ratepayers will pay more in fixed costs because of that, the billions of dollars that we're going to have to spend to get renewable intermittence to load centers and from new generators to load centers.
Now, real quick, a follow-up on that. So the CREST project was done probably in a different way than most transmission gets added nationwide, right? And I've heard that for some reason they're trying to change that as we're talking about adding new transmission. So instead of, everybody paying for the new transmission, in your bill, that it's only, that area. What are your thoughts on where that's heading, or what's the thinking of? Because I think that CREST was incredibly successful. Why change the method, right?
Yeah, so I think the argument, Andres, has been that, in ERCOT, where transmission is effectively socialized across all customers, it doesn't really provide any discernment for developers on where they would build their generators, whether it's a renewable or a dispatchable generator. So, because all the transmission costs are uplifted, right? And so there was really no incentive for developers to build generation closer to the load to mitigate this congestion problem, right?
Right.
And so one of the things that the General Assembly did last session was they passed a bill that effectively mandated an allowance, if you will, so that it could help to better incentivize the siting of these generators. So that those regulations have been put in place, and I don't know the ins and outs of them because I'm not in the transmission business per se, but certainly that has the potential to make better decisions.
Yeah. So
And
maybe
you're right that ERCOT is unique amongst the RTOs in terms of how it handles the build out of transmission. I did a lot of work prior to coming to Texas in PJM and MISO, New York, and boy, it's a totally different game there because the developers are 100% responsible for that transmission costs.
Right. Llewellyn, any thoughts?
Yes, I'm wondering about extreme weather and maintenance. You get to a point in the heat where you simply cannot maintain the system. It's too hot for linemen, too hot for people to work on machinery. And conversely, in the cold, I mean, is there a deterioration in the reliability of the system because of delayed or canceled maintenance produced by the weather conditions?
We don't see it. I mean, our linemen, I think linemen generally across the nation, across the world, they understand that they have to work in all types of weather. And obviously, we do things like we shift their work hours so that they start at 5:30 or 6 in the morning during the summers, and usually they're out of the heat by 2 or 3 in the afternoon, but always on call if needed. So we try to manage that hazard, that heat hazard risk for personnel as much as we can. Guys that work in power plants that have to run at the hottest times of the day, though, if something breaks down, unfortunately, they just still have to work. And of course, we have safety rules in place to make sure that they remain safe in terms of the amount of time that they can be exposed to that hot temperature, and we manage that appropriately. But maintaining the unit's not a problem. The one thing I think we see in Texas, and we see it everywhere across the world, is that as the ambient temperature increases, the density of the air gets less, and we can't force as much air through our machines, and so we lose capacity when we get above 105 degrees or so in Texas. We see a measurable decrease in the output in the nameplate rating of these units.
Yeah.
The I, excuse me, I beg your pardon. Are you involved in DER? Do you have demand management systems in place? And how extensive are they?
So we do have programs in place. They're really only available or really used by larger loads, larger customers. And I think in general, if I had to characterize them, is there's not a lot of interest in participation by industrial customers. They're there to produce a product, and they want to produce their product. And so reducing their output has to be a huge economic incentive for them to gear back. And so we don't see a big participation rate here in Denton.
How about home and home systems? Google is very interested in that. It's just put $100 million into Home Renew, and what they call a virtual power plant, but we might not think of it as such because it's only one side of the equation. Are they active in Texas? Are you interested in that kind of
Absolutely.
thing?
Yeah, we haven't had a very robust program here in Denton, and really it's been driven by the technology of our billing system more than anything. The lack of keeping up, with the Joneses on technology. It's kind of limited our ability to do that. But we are in the next 12 months, we'll be rolling out a virtual power plant offering for customers to participate in. How much participation we get remains to be seen. I know there's a similar program in Austin that I know you're familiar with, and it's probably a better measure to see what kind of uptake would be using Austin as an example.
Absolutely.
Interesting. What percentage of your meters are smart meters?
All of them.
All of them. Okay,
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, all of Texas went that way by
There's still a few don't have AMI.
Yeah, but it's pretty rare. It's pretty rare.
Yeah.
Terry, final thoughts here. Wanna get your thoughts on when you think about how the customer is change, and many customers are what we would call prosumers. They have electric vehicles, solar panels, energy storage. You are deciding what are you going to do about perhaps owning some of that infrastructure and building a different partnership with the customer. When you look at your customer in Denton, what's your take on 5 years from now, 10 years from now, all this AI technology coming in to help you run a better business, to help the customers buy better solutions? What's your take on that of that relationship? How is that changing? How are you managing that change? What are you leveraging? What's your thoughts on how that's going to evolve?
Well, I think it'll be slower than most people think it will be. And part of that is because I think, as much as we'd like to think that since we're all in this industry, that customers really want to know more about it, in reality, they don't, right? They just want to be able to turn that switch on and the power come on, right? And so anything you layer on top of that requires them to learn more about the industry. I think we'll have a hard time getting them educated enough to kind of connect the dots on how it benefits the environment or benefits them economically. So I feel like it's going to be slower than most people think. in terms of its application to the customer experience that they see with their electric utility.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, that's my personal opinion.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's fine.
I
Wait,
mean, we
wait.
do, as we've been using artificial intelligence through machine learning and other things for 10, 15 years in looking at forecasting electrical demand and looking at price dispersion and price
Mhm.
modeling of hourly and intra-hour energy prices. So it's not a new technology to us.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say real quick that uh how do you see the challenge or the opportunity of when you do integrated resource planning, you control all the infrastructure, you have the purse, you decide what you do, and now you're gonna maybe more and more leverage, the edge of the grid, and how do you envision that DER element being part of integrated resource planning? How would you go about doing it or making it better, or what are your thoughts?
Well, I think initially, like I said, we're currently working on an IRP, an integrated resource plan right now. So, we're being very conservative in terms of what we think the adoption rate for DER and for, virtual power plants and things like that, the battery in the home
Mm-hmm.
benefit, things like that. Because, you know, as I said before, we're in the business of serving electric service to our customers, regardless of what shows up in those programs. We still have that obligation. So
Mm-hmm.
we have to be ultra conservative in our assumptions about that. I think 5 years from now, after we've got a couple of years of data in terms of what the adoption rate for some of those things are, it'll be part of the next iteration of
Mm-hmm.
the integrated resource planning.
Yeah. Will it ever make sense? One last question from me, Llewellyn, I'll switch to you. Will it ever
Sure.
make sense, Terry, or what are your thoughts of a megawatt or the absence of a megawatt, if I may call it a negawatt?
Yeah.
Will a negawatt ever have the same value of a negawatt? Could that paradigm ever emerge?
Oh, I think a negawatt, as you put it, is always going to be more valuable than a megawatt. Absolutely. And boy, we like to access those negawatts if we can,
Right,
because we know that our load is growing, and every one that I don't have to go build something or buy something for is in our customer's best interest.
right.
So yeah, we'd like to figure out a way to better access those negawatts.
Now,
Llewellyn.
utilities, Terry, have traditionally never said no. They accommodate new growth. They accommodate new load extraordinarily well. I mean, it's been one of the interesting phenomenon of the growth of the nation, how the utility industry has been there in tandem with that growth. Do you see a time when you're going to have to say, no, we cannot handle this new load? You better not build the factory here, or we cannot have the data center on our system, or sorry, if you're going to do a development, you may have to put in a microgrid, a self-contained microgrid, because we do not have the resource to sell to you.
Well, I think, I guess I would just respond to that. Number one, I've got a fiduciary responsibility to provide electric to people in my jurisdictional monopoly. Have to, don't have a choice. The question is one of timing. How quickly can I build to meet their need? And I
Mhm.
think that's the model that we're in today. I think your question is very timely, especially in ERCOT in Texas with these very large loads. I mean, the 40 gigawatts that Andrus mentioned. I mean, how are we going to accommodate 40 gigawatts, right? I think your question is very, very on point, and I don't have an answer for you. I will say that from a municipal utility perspective, the last thing I want is the state coming in and telling me how to operate my business,
Right.
and that's what I really I don't want to see happen. But I do see people leaning that way. I mean, some of the comments that were made by Pablo Vegas, and we've heard some other things, tend to lead us to believe that that may be the direction they're heading into. That, hey, you can't connect that 100 megawatt load because ERCOT can't handle it. Well, I'm not sure how that works in terms of current state law and my fiduciary responsibility to serve all customers. You cannot cite a home or a business in Denton without being hooked up to the grid.
Right.
You can't get an occupancy permit without being hooked up. So it's a great question, a very timely one.
Thank you.
Terry, what's in front of you? We're on top of the hour. What's going on the next 6 months? I'm hoping that you're going to join us at the Digital 360 Summit in Austin, September 24th through the 26th. But other than that, what's in front of you? What are you doing? What are you working on? What are you traveling to or doing anything?
Yeah, so next week I'll be at the Texas Public Power Association annual meeting in Austin. That'll be a great 3-day event.
I will see you there.
Yeah, I'll see you there, and hopefully we'll have some really good discussions with other forward-thinking people about the smart grid and renewable energy and how to manage all this growth that's coming at us. I'm sure that'll be a topic that we'll be visiting on.
Yep.
The other thing that's in front of me right now is this integrated resource plan and trying to put in place a roadmap for Denton and hopefully a model for other communities that want to get to 100% renewable. We're working very hard on that, and we'll be making presentations to our governing bodies in the fall of this year, trying to make some hard decisions about what we're going to do and how we transition from the current market that's still dominated by hydrocarbons to a transition to a clean energy, a true clean energy future.
Yeah.
And so we're really focused on that. We've got a lot of education to do with policymakers here in the community to understand that the physics of how the system works, how the transmission and distribution system work, and the intermittency risks, how we can't just say no to dispatchable generation until we have a viable alternative that's a clean one, whether it's nuclear, whether it's long duration battery storage. There's something that we're transitioning to.
Yeah.
And we're trying to put a map together to try to get us to that. Hydrogen,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's always a pleasure to see you and talk to you and catch up. And Llewellyn, any final thoughts?
Well, thank you very much, Terry. I've learned a lot, and I think it's very interesting that you are at 100%, and I hope you can maintain it in face of all this growth.
Yeah, well, it's a challenge, as I think, as you guys both put it. It's certainly an ongoing challenge. And
let me ask you an ancillary question, if the chairman will allow it, and that is, what about water in your area? Electricity shortage and water shortage tend now to go together.
Yeah, and we've been blessed, I think, in North Texas by having some very large reservoirs, and the city has water rights on those large reservoirs. We have recently, and one of my responsibilities as I've been here at the city was to run the water and wastewater division while I was running DME during some time where we had some people that were leaving the organization. And the making our drought programs more robust, to be more proactive, to better manage our resource, to better utilize gray water, for example, for irrigation in new developments. There's lots of benefits associated. So yeah, in a rapidly growing community like Denton and others around Texas, you're absolutely right, Luan. Water is a key. You can't build infrastructure. You can't build new development without that water and wastewater infrastructure. And you got to have the resources. we're expanding our water, one of our water treatment plants over the next 3 years. We're going to be increasing it by 50 million gallons a day. And I think 15 years from now, the plan calls for another 50 million gallons per day. So it's an ongoing issue.
Thank you very much, Terry.
Yep.
Very informative.
Yeah, Terry, thank you very much again, and we'll see you next week, and we'll keep talking. And all the best to you. And if all of you listening, you haven't been to Denton, you have to go. It's green, it's beautiful, very nice.
Yes.
Thank you. Have a great
Bye.
day. Appreciate it. Bye.
Bye, guys.